first used to mean economic performance, about the yields of farmer and the economic results. Now we see performance as something more multidimensional, so integrating both economic aspects and environmental aspects. And we think in many ways they can go hand in hand. And this reform is about this economic and environmental performance going hand in hand, at least in the first concept. So I can give examples of how we see this joint performance. I can take the example of nutrient management, so about the use of fertilizers that can be made in the most optimal way for farmers. So that's clearly a benefit for the farmer to reduce the use of fertilizer, when possible, or at least optimize this use. And that in turn will be good for to avoid leakage of excess in nutrients like nitrogen or phosphorus inputs. So when there is this joint management of resources or of inputs, this can be beneficial for both farmers and for the environment, and that we can call a new performance. We have similar examples regarding soils, where the good management of soil, the soil health, is clearly a benefit for farmers, certainly in the longer term, to have healthy soils. For yields, it's very good. And then healthy soils are very important and good for the biodiversity of the soil, also for having carbon stored in soil, and for retaining water. Having said that, in our jargon, the performance of the policy, so not so much at the level of farmers, but the performance of the policy, is something that has to do with the results and impact of the policy itself. And of course, in this reform, we also put a lot of emphasis on monitoring these results and on trying to get the best impacts of the policy itself. And that's not just for good management of public funds, that's also, of course, for farmers. We all have interest in implementing a policy that is efficient, that brings results, that bring better impact. And one of the elements for this performance at policy level is one of the new elements of this reform is what we call this new delivery model, where we're leaving more margin for member states to adapt their support schemes to the local conditions. And it's particularly relevant for environmental or climate interventions, where clearly the practices that we're supporting, for which farmers can be remunerated, need to be well adapted to their local conditions, to their soils, to their landscape, to their farming systems. So this flexibility that member states now have to design their support schemes in the best way locally is, in our view, an important step towards a gain of performance of the policy. And we have increased funds for the coming years in research. So that can be about more resistant varieties of crops, that can be about new technologies, advanced robotics, that can be about using different types of products, less chemicals, more natural products. To support the crops. So that there are many areas in which good progresses are made. But of course, the whole point about these advanced technologies is really to bring them to the farmers, to make sure that farmers receive the advice, the guidance that go with these new technologies, not just here are the results of a research project. And for that, under the Common Agricultural Policy, we're also trying to support this better transfer of knowledge. So, for example, we're supporting projects under the European Innovation Partnership for productivity and sustainability, with groups that have advisors, farmers and researchers working together. And we're also supporting advisory services. So this is also something we support. And finally, there are also supports or types of supports available for the new technologies themselves. So investment supports are possible under the Common Agricultural Policy. So for precision farming, very typically, but all other kinds of green investments that can help roll out these technologies. And I would say that also the area-based types of payments, so the changes in practice of farmers, is also often needed with these new technologies. It's not just the technology alone, but some changes in the farming systems. And there again, the CAP is trying to accompany farmers in adopting these new technologies. Now, why are they more relevant or perhaps more important for young farmers? Is because young farmers are just newly trained in general, so sometimes they already know very well about these new technologies, or they can be more eager to learn about these new technologies. As they are also starting their business, often they can think about new investments. They are starting new investments, for which, by the way, they can get better support under the CAP. So that's another reason. And naturally, young farmers think about the long-term sustainability of their farms. And in that sense, we see also a likely more increased awareness about the need for reducing inputs, for adopting new ways of farming. Having said that, of course, we encourage all farmers to adopt these new technologies that can be really win-win, so help them reduce their inputs, reduce their cost, and at the same time reduce the use of natural resources or of chemicals, these kind of things. It simply designates the part of the Common Agricultural Policy which deals with environmental and climate aspects of agriculture. So it's about the support interventions in the field of environment and climate, and it's about certain rules that farmers would have to respect in this area under the CAP. So that's what we call the green architecture. It's this green part of the Common Agricultural Policy. So this green architecture, as I was just saying, contains some obligations for farmers, and that's what we call the conditionality. So when farmers receive support from the Common Agricultural Policy, most support is linked to this conditionality, income support and other area-based, animal-based support. Farmers have to respect certain conditions in order to receive their full support. And these conditions have clearly strengthened over time. It's fair to say that they are becoming more and more demanding for farmers. For example, the new conditionality, so these new conditions integrate what is now, for what has been up to 2022, the greening. That is probably well known by farmers, has existed since 2014. So there is this set of conditions to be respected by farmers, the conditionality. And then there are a lot of incentives for farmers to adopt new practices which are good for the environment, good for climate. And there we have the new eco schemes, typically that will represent at least 25% of direct payments, of the income support part of the CAP. That's a big part of the Common Agricultural Policy. In other words, it means that now a quarter of income support for farmers will be delivered through the support for farming practices good for environment and the climate. And then we have other kind of supports under the second pillar of the CAP, which can be also about encouraging new practices good for environment and climate, agri-environment management commitments, that's their name, support for organic farming, support for farmers who farm in Natura 2000 protected areas, so they have specific constraints, support also for green investments. And investments are particularly interesting. I mentioned already precision farming, but can be also investments in certain environmental infrastructure like tree lines, like in agroforestry systems, setting up new agroforestry systems, or hedges, planting hedges. That would be part of green investments as well. And we see that as very important. And so all together, this green architecture, we hope will bring really new results and will help and encourage farmers to engage in this ecological transition. We think it's really win-win, that it's both for farmers and for the environment. And that these actions that have now been planned by member states in their CAP strategic plans will also be clearly associated with the long-term sustainability of the sector. They go hand in hand. Maybe to add that in Italy, since this interview is for our Italian farmers, that in the Italian new CAP strategic plans, there are more than 7.5 billion of European funds dedicated to environmental and climate types of actions. And so quite a significant part of this CAP plan dedicated to these types of actions. It's indeed very interesting to encourage a cooperative approach between farmers to reach environmental or climate goals. And at least at agricultural level, I can give a few examples. For example, for a biodiversity purpose, we ask farmers to protect or to increase the landscape features or the non-productive areas, as we call them. So areas that can really be hosting biodiversity, insects, small animals, and so on. And if each and individual farmers do this in small individual plots, or whether they do it collectively, thinking about how these areas can be connected together at landscape level, that would make a huge difference for the protection of biodiversity. So we do encourage these collective approaches for these agri-environmental practices. And this is true for these landscape features. It's true also for managing water, clearly, and thinking about nature-based solutions for water. That's also much better at landscape level, and that can have much better effects against some droughts, as we've had last summer. I would like to add that we're thinking also not just at agricultural level, but also for the whole food chain level, how to encourage this collective approach and have a better impact on environment and climate. And there are new rules now agreed also under the CAP to encourage this cooperation between farmers, but also between farmers and other actors in the food chain. And so there have been some rules now allowing to derogate from certain strict competition rules when they make agreements between themselves related to achieving environmental or climate goals. And that's a new approach. It's starting, but we hope that there will be a lot of engagement in these new types of agreements between farmers and with actors along the food chain to reach these environmental goals.